Right. All right. Ready?
Yeah.
Okay. So, first ever episode of Resting Pitch Face.
Indeed.
Chris Hodgson, Chief Operating Officer at Flaunt Digital, knows a thing or two about today's topic. So we're going to dive into decoding ad spend, what you need to know, some critical points, what you need to track, how to spend effectively, and the changing landscape in media. So critical aspects of what people should be focusing on, what people understand as media and how it's changed, where you should be putting your budget and how to get the most out of it. And I guess common mistakes or common things that brands either overlook or miss. So broadly speaking, what is ad spend? Let's start
there. Good question. Ad spend. I guess it's just a form of marketing budget. Essentially, it's market budget that's dedicated to, I guess most marketers would break it up by brand or performance, but essentially it's just a biddable budget or buyable budget that you can put into an ad platform such as Google, Meta, TikTok. So when people commonly talk about media budget, it's just marketing spend that is used to buy inventory or biddable inventory, such as a search ad or a Facebook ad placement or something like that.
And when we're talking about media spend or ad spend, where does it sit in terms of the importance of the channel itself?
Well, I guess that's kind of decided ahead of time. As part of a marketing plan, you would probably decide where the most effective marketing channel is for you as a brand. So is it a direct response campaign that you need e-commerce sales on, retail sales on? That really is the deciding factor in where you put that marketing budget or that media spend, call it. Obviously, there's limitations to certain platforms and channels, and there'll be preferences to where you put that media spend based on the objective or the goal. So if the client, for example, is wanting to do an awareness piece, something that's made up of, I guess, they've got a really nice creative plan or something that's, really visually stimulating, you're not going to look to Google search, for instance, to put your marketing budget there because it's not going to deliver the desired outcome. The desired outcome of what I've just mentioned there would be something that's a visual channel. So TikTok, user-generated content, display placement, something like that that's going to drive engagement or awareness or stimulate something on an engagement basis. But if you're looking for hard direct response sales, you're looking to convert users, then obviously there's going to be a bigger preference or priority put towards channels that drive that kind of activity. So I think outlining the fundamental premise or goal of the campaign is quite crucial to deciding how you distribute and how you break that spend up across those marketing platforms and channels.
So you've touched on direct response and you've touched on brand. How do you get a balance between those when it comes to media spend?
That's a big question. Gets thrown about quite a lot. I think my position on it is that you have to do both, and your marketing budget has to work to, I guess, deliver on both parts of them. And it depends on your constitution as a marketer and what your background is, what the business goals are. But I think there's an understanding or a thinking that if you're a smaller brand or a challenger brand or even entry to market brand, that if that marketing budget has to be made up mainly of direct response to get the wheels turning, to get something back and just evidence the fact that budget can actually deliver on something. And then on the reverse of that, you've got your market leaders, you've got the brands that have the capability to pump more into brand. But it's no coincidence how the bigger brands got to where they did, because they've invested in brand loyalty, they've invested in trust and people, And what ensues after that is the ability to put into performance marketing, and it works. And it only works and it only converts because of the stuff that's underpinning it. So the brand effort, the loyalty that customers have. And we're living in a world where, that's everything right now, because exclusivity of product or offering is getting whittled down. Everybody, and a lot of retailers sell the same stuff. They've got the same products. They've got the same suppliers. It's anybody's game to who sells it, who's going to convert, and who's going to build the biggest revenue out of that product set is going to be the ones that have the largest brand loyalty. And how do you achieve that? You achieve that through investing in brand. But it's easy from a marketer's perspective to say, let's bang everything into performance, because that's the stuff that's going to hit the bottom line and it's going to happen quickly. And no, that's perfectly fine. There's no misconceptions around that. It does. But often it can be a bit of a race to the bottom when it comes to performance, because all you're doing is you're trying to get every customer, you're eating into your margins, and you're just competing against other brands with the same products, essentially. And, you're going to find yourself in a tough position long term if you don't recognize that brand is also quite a fundamentally paramount part of brand investment or media investment. So in answer to your question, I know I've gone around the houses a little bit there, but I think there needs to be a balance. What that split looks like, is it 50-50? Is it 75-25? That again, it's purely based on, I guess, as well, what the brand can survive on. We don't know, it's exclusive to a business, and it's quite, it needs to be thought out well, because if you decide that you've only got, you need to start making an ROI after 3 months of investment, then probably pumping 50% of your marketing budget into brand, you're not going to survive as a business. So there's things like, obviously, equity in the business, cash flow, stuff like that. All these things come into, decision making on where that investment is. But part of the issue with that is the correct people and stakeholders involved with communicating what I've just mentioned there about, what cash flow looks like, what marketing budget is there, and how useful that's going to be. And not communicating, or don't typically communicate as well as they should be with marketers and then the agencies to be able to put a perfectly produced marketing plan together.
Do you think that there's a hangover of overinvestment in performance and direct response from COVID that brands are starting to now realise hasn't got longevity?
What, in terms of the ploughing more into performance?
Well, yeah, you look through COVID, I reference COVID quite a bit when it comes to this, because people have more cash in their pocket that managed to still maintain jobs that could work remotely. They didn't have anything to spend the money on. So brands capitalised on that by pumping more into direct response, and it worked. A lot of e-com brands did really well through COVID, especially in like home furnishings, for example. Do you think that shift in user behaviour was something that led brands down a bit of a naive path in terms of brand investment?
Oh yeah, without a doubt. And still to this day, it's tough to realign thinking to how it was pre-COVID, because it's almost like there's a sense of denial around the demand was so high through that period. And everybody, in that space, like you've just mentioned, the home furnishing sector absolutely boomed. But, the days of, those that demand and those conversion rates that we used to see through that period were just never sustainable. But yeah, there's an absolute hangover of, why can we not achieve former glory, let's say, on performance? And I think as well rolled into that, there's so much development with products that's happened between that time. Obviously, a lot of media buying and media spend is now essentially put into, a lot of the AI-based campaign types like PMax, for example, or Advantage Plus for Meta. So, the way of buying has been simplified, but through that, as well, that we've lost all the data that we had to support the post-COVID or mid-COVID boom that we saw. It's irrelevant now. It's irrelevant because so much has changed on a product basis too. But I think that, don't get me wrong, as much as Google and Meta get slated, they have introduced tools and campaign types that have almost helped reclaim a little bit of the former glory of what happened there. And I think if we'd have carried on the trajectory of using the same campaign types as we did through there, there'd be businesses running the spend into the ground left, right, and centre. So I think the evolution of the product has helped almost retain a little bit of the glory that was there before. But yeah, I guess a simple answer to your question, yeah, there is a massive hangover of those days, and a lot of businesses putting so much emphasis still on direct response, whereas I believe there should be a portion of that gets recognised and pushed into more brand focus, brand awareness. And I guess recognition of other channels as well. Obviously, media spend and paid media channels is an easy, channel to select in terms of driving performance. But there's absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt, underestimation and under-evaluation of SEO as a medium, because we're all looking at the same signals as well, like with the expert EAT content for SEO and how Google is interpreting the information there versus how it interprets paid and landing experiences and copy that you write. All that is almost getting merged a little bit. So the practices that we used to use for paid, that were really numbers driven and strategic, are more interactive based, are more customer based, just like SEO is. So there's an argument there for, if they're both looking at the same signals, is there more value also in considering, should that media spend be, put into other valuable areas such as SEO, which gets massively under-recognized as a channel. But again, it's always easy to fall back on the old faithful, old reliable performance marketing, doesn't it?
That's a little bit of a more straightforward lever to pull. But you mentioned there about platforms moving towards AI and more automation and almost making key decisions for you, taking things out of your hands. And I think with that comes the removal of capability when it comes to tracking and attribution. Tracking and attribution has been a hot topic for a long time, but I think it's even more prevalent now because we don't have access to what we used to have access to in terms of data. So certainly from a natural search perspective. So how do you balance showing the efficacy of media channels with the current attribution issues?
Yeah. Well, in all honesty, I mean, what I'd like to do first before we go on to that question, you mentioned about almost automation taking over, and the term black box gets thrown about a lot.
Yeah.
And I think it's an unfair term to use in the practice of paid media management, because my God, if you have got an unskilled manager working on an account and trying to leverage AI, you're going to cause yourself more problems with using that than not doing the former practices that we used to use without AI. And it takes an incredibly skilled strategist, analyst, manager to be able to make sure that you feed in the algorithms and you feed in AI the right inputs and the right information in order to do it. And I think there's a bit of stigma around, has it become a simpler practice? Have Google and Meta taken away the controls that you formerly had and you'll just get whatever performance you're given? No, there's 1,000 other things to consider. Let me give you a simple analogy of, let's call it the shift from mechanical combustion engine vehicles to electrics. So they're simpler beast, aren't they? Electrics. They've got a battery. They've still got a load of other components and what have you. But you'd think that obviously it'd be far easier to repair. It'd be far simpler. There's 1,000 other components in an engine on a combustion car. But if an electric vehicle breaks, then you're going to have to do more work on the diagnostics. And that's a lesser known practice. You have to be more scientific. You have to think more strategically. Whereas a component goes in an engine on a combustion vehicle, you almost know instantaneously what it is. You can see visually what it is. So that's kind of my analogy and my way of thinking of it. Has got simpler in some respects, but you have to be far more cleverer in dissecting and trying to understand where it went wrong and why and how to put it right.
I think that bleeds into the whole use case in the context of marketing for AI. It's like when it first came out, it was like, oh, it's going to replace content marketers, it's going to replace copywriters, it's going to replace SEO, it's going to replace paid media. You're just going to be able to turn everything on AI and it'll do everything for you. But that's completely wrong. Being able to pull the right levers and give it the right information to do what it needs to do is just another thing now that marketers have to contend with and have to be skilled enough. When you employ an agency, you employ a specialist that carries the experience pre-AI and post-AI to know how to effectively integrate it into your system. And the risk, I think, with doing it yourself and trusting automation without the experience of knowing what you button you're pressing is a massive risk.
Couldn't agree more. If you're new to the products that are currently on offer through some of the marketing platforms at the minute, they might seem simpler on the surface, but an experienced and skilled manager would be able to get under the hood of that and turn things around pretty quickly. And I think that's kind of goes a little bit unrecognized is the fact that it has got easier in some, like a lot of the manual work that we used to do, a lot of the work in sheets and a lot of the uploading of assets and things like that has been simplified, no doubt about it. But all it's done is made the jobs easy. It's made it more effortless doing that. But the time that would have been formerly spent in that is then put into the clever stuff, the tracking, the management, the attribution analysis, the creative analysis, and everything that's under the hood is getting a little bit more attention, whereas everything before was almost like surface level stuff. You put in, you get out.
I read a piece from Kieran Flanagan, who was the CMO of HubSpot, and he said that marketers are going to have to now revert back to spending more time on their craft in the wake of AI, because automation is going to mean your work that you used to have to do in a spreadsheet, your uploading of your assets, is all going to be time that can be given back to marketers to focus on the craft, which is going to allow better stories, better brands, better capabilities. And that's how I think AI will ultimately end up being shoved in as part of day-to-day.
Yeah, definitely. Couldn't agree more. All it's doing is awarding time back to the profession to be able to do better things in the areas that they're skilled at. And you can't ignore the surge of product and, different campaign types and, strategy types that are there to be taken advantage of now. And it can be a minefield trying to figure out what's the right approach for a brand. And only somebody or a team with good enough experience to be able to instantly put your finger on what the right approach is and the right campaign type for, let's say, or, biddable type for that form of creative or campaign goal will know what to do. So yeah, again, it's got simpler, but it's got far more vast as well in terms of
it's only going to carry on. So bringing it back to attribution, obviously, like I say, the platforms have changed, the capability of the platforms has changed. How do you quantify where you're putting your spend in an age where it's getting more and more difficult to get the data that you need to have that final piece of the puzzle?
Yeah, it's a really complex paradigm. And, I think we've come on leaps and bounds over the last, I would say, especially 2 to 3 years in terms of attribution. I think I can't believe, almost looking back now, that we used to report on linear and last touch attribution. But that's the system that was in place there and then, and we did the best with the models that we had access to. But I think it's simplified things, having data driven and all the automated ways of reporting now in helping decide where the value is. I think we've got a clearer understanding of how effective that marketing budget is, whereas, formerly it had been a case of, well, which channel drove the last click sale, and that would get the value fundamentally, and that would in turn get more contribution in terms of marketing budget. But as we know, that's not quite always the case, because there can be up to 100 touch points before somebody even gets to the point of wanting to purchase. So yeah, it's a huge mystery in doing that, but data-driven attribution and using multiple sources of tracking and attribution is also quite key to understanding where you should be putting the budget, because obviously one model or and another model, or one platform and another platform, are never going to agree with each other. So there has to be a centralized, amalgamated understanding of what that's doing. And I would say as well, don't even just stop at, trusting what, call it ROAS, Google Ads is telling you, talk to the internal teams that you're dealing with. There's been so many instances in my experience in paid of, you think one thing's performing really well because the data's showing you one thing, and you trust that data wholeheartedly. And then you discover that, there's some sort of tracking discrepancy on the client side, and there's a ton of mysteries to undo there. And it might just fall down to a simple tracking issue on the website. But, up until that point, the agency's been criticized for not delivering on performance. Agency's saying, actually, no, you're wrong. Platform's saying this, we trust this tracking, we trust this attribution. And then you just constantly get you're in this cyclical motion of disagreeing over performance. But it obviously takes the correct talent from both sides to be able to piece that together and put a centralized opinion, I guess, an educated opinion on what's happening and why it's happening, which is why tracking and attribution and getting all your conversion tracking in place has never been more critical. With the, introduction of enhanced conversions and the risk of losing cookie tracking and, all the new initiatives that are trying to tie up the whole tracking and attribution scene, it's never been more important to talk to the internal teams and figure out what you're seeing. Does that reflect internally? And is there something that's potentially standing out as we've got something's not quite right here?
I think that's where AI is really going to come into its own in the next 12 months. I've already been playing with tools that allow you to plug all your sources in, and it will spit out exactly what you need to see, and it will merge them and look at them against each other and try and work out whether there's a mismatch with what data to trust, how to trust it, what metrics you need to be focusing on. And I think that's something that marketers have been capable of doing, but it's involved so much manual work that it doesn't become regular, like bread and butter practice. Whereas the capability that's coming, or that's already pretty much here with AI, means that you can do that work at speed, and it can become part of the regular, which is ultimately going to mean that you can make more of your budget and invest better.
Definitely.
So everybody wins.
Yeah. There's a lot to be said for, piecing it all together as well. And it's a mammoth task, is dissecting attribution. If you just look at some simple channel path analysis in J4, you're going to find the number of interactions and, sequences of visitation and engagement through to a purchase is highly, highly complex. But, we have to put trust in some of these platforms like Google's, dedication to put in attribution and the right information readily available in the platforms for users is absolutely terrific. It's incredible, but also understand that has to align with what the clients are seeing as well. And that tends to be the biggest pitfall, in my opinion. Not necessarily the attribution that you were able to record and trust on the platform side, but is the data backing up internally and with other tracking suites there? Because that tends to be the kind of dividing mechanic or topic of conversation. But yeah, the little things like, obviously, again, it comes down to a skilled professional to be able to know these kind of things. But obviously, the delay, the conversion delay, if somebody interacts with a product on one specific day, you might have your attribution settings set up to record a conversion on the day of click rather than the day of conversion, and that's hugely going to skew your view of spend on that day. If you ramped spend up on that day that you got the sale, let's say you had this setting in place to record the setting on the day of the click rather than the purchase, which came later, you're going to look at your spend on that first day and think, oh God, yeah, we ramped the spend up and the sale came in there dead on. And then you're not going to award any credit to a future day where the actual sale come in. You're going to look at that day and go, oh, that were a shocking day, that were a really bad day, let's reduce spend. So there's a lot to be said for how you pivot and how you look and analyze conversions and how you analyze spend, because you could just freak out and look at a period and go, we've not had anything, but actually it was a previous period that drove that performance on a future date. Yeah.
Let's assume that you're doing a multi-platform campaign, all the usual suspects, Google, Facebook. What would you say there's any tools that you need to manage and optimize outside of the platforms themselves? And how regularly should you be looking at the data and tweaking?
Yeah, I mean, if you're obviously a more advanced advertiser, you'd probably be looking at the more premium suites such as Search Ads 360 or a GA 360 package that would allow you to centralize all of your reporting and add layers of more, complex attribution modeling that you can do there, or just have your own, have another off-the-shelf agnostic tracking platform or your own internal tracking, and apply some logic to that. But yeah, I mean, the platforms are always going to fight against each other for sales. As we know, any experienced paid media professional will know that each channel will always want to take the most credit for their engagement and associate any value to their marketing platform. So you do need, even if you're talking about merging data with GA 360, there's still a bias there on Google's side to give favor to transactions or interactions that come through the Google product or the Google ecosystem. So you've got to just weigh that with caution. You've got to obviously look at the centralized view. You've got to then look at them obviously exclusively as well and come to some sort of middle idea of what drove a specific level of performance. And experimentation is quite key to understanding attribution and what's driving what as well. You need to put the correct experiments in place so that you've got a clear understanding of when you make a change. Have you also been doing something out of the ordinary on another marketing platform, or has it been business as usual? But you need to have controlled experiments in each going off at different times to make sure you understand what's influencing what. And I think just from a basic analytical level, you'll be able to pick out some trends quite easily there if you take that approach of test and learn.
You've got things like budget caps to stop you overspending and stuff, but what about the frequency in which you should be checking in?
On performance in general, or?
Yeah, I think obviously you're spending at you constantly when you're setting a campaign live. Once it's live, it's spending.
Yeah.
So from an optimization and a budget control standpoint, outside of putting the ceilings in place, how often should you be keeping on top of it?
Well, if you're talking like e-commerce, FMCG, you need to be in there daily.
Yeah.
Not necessarily optimizing daily, but analyzing daily. I would say, obviously, for slower, let's call it a B2B client or something like that, you'd probably be because the transactions or the inquiry lead volume is, further apart, and you're not getting the same frequency of actions there or conversions, you probably would want to, obviously, like anything, just leave it longer to be able to see the outcome of your changes. And I think this is half of the issue. Every paid media manager has had the guilt almost of, am I checking in enough? Am I making enough changes? Am I being proactive enough to be able to drive performance? But, sometimes less is more. You need to observe the results before you jump in there and make some changes, because a change that you might have made is due to make an impact. You've just not left it long enough to do. But obviously in days gone by, when I've worked on clients like Asda, for instance, and, spending fortunes a day, you definitely need to be in the account and at least observing what's going on so that those budget changes can be reacted to. There may be something, you've got to be super cautious as well with big brand names, because they're the ones that, if you're responsible just for the paid side of things and the whole comms team isn't aligned, which it should be, but if it isn't, and it does happen, and they launch a TV ad, for instance, that you're unaware of, you're going to see your brand traffic go through the ceiling and you're going to spend a fortune. And had you not known about that and you didn't put the appropriate restrictions or budget caps in place or have a strategy around it, then you're going to get caught out and it's going to cost you. So I think the risks are obviously significantly higher when managing budget for clients that have above the line, TV, connected TV, other activities. So you kind of need to all be aligned on the comms plan if that's the case.
So just to summarize then, we've gone over ad spend, basics of ad spend, platforms, where you should be focusing your attention, the impact of AI, attribution, how to use your budgets most effectively. Is there anything that you want to throw on the table that you feel like is essential to success when it comes to paid media before we wrap up?
I would say don't be afraid of AI. It's, it might seem scary, and it might feel like there's control taken away from you, but there's huge advantages, especially on a reporting basis. There's loads to be had there to put the control more firmly back in the manager's hands. So don't be afraid of it. Just test it and see what your outcome is. But there tends to be a lot of a notion of trepidation and uncertainty around you using it. My version is just get on with it. It's it's gonna happen anyway. Just learn it, figure out what works, what doesn't. And I think another thing is not diversifying enough, sticking to your bread and butter, and doing what you know. The game is changing. It's changed so much more in the last 3 years than it did the former 10 years before that, because of things like user generated content is a thing now, and sponsored content in that domain. It's authenticity. Customers are after genuine experience and creative. That wasn't the case, or maybe it was the case 10 years ago. We just didn't obviously have the capability to do it in the same way that we did now. But there's a huge appetite for variety of content. So nobody's gonna. And I think we've set a precedent as well for that way of buying as well. Consumers want to have that influence of somebody that they trust using a product, or some authentic content that's giving them the final say on that they can go and buy it. A search ad is not going to convert your user anymore like it used to do. And that's not just, that was the only medium, one of few mediums to find something and buy something. But there's, a whole, universe of and spectrum of ways that people consider an item before buying now. And I would say advice to anybody, anybody in that paid management role is to diversify your skills, be open to other mediums that are going to help and support your management of those specific channels in isolation. Talk to social teams, creative teams, and figure out what's the best total campaign solution for driving that customer. So yeah, diversification is quite fundamental to that in terms of the advice that I would give.
Okay, good. And if you found this episode useful, please subscribe and join us on the next episode, where we'll be giving as many tips as we possibly can on making your marketing spend work as hard as possible. Okay, this or that, quick fire.
Ooh,
You ready?
go on then.
Big budget campaigns versus small focused campaigns.
Benefits to both. Comes down to objective.
Oh, yes. That's like my answer to every one of these questions. Google ads versus Facebook ads.
What? I might get shot when I walk out of this room if I decide on one of them. Again, depends on goal. I guess if you're looking for direct response, then I would say that Google has a predatory toolkit for doing that.
I'm going to answer that one as well, just so that you don't take all the weight on that. I think Facebook's better because it's cheaper.
Depends how you manage it. Could be expensive if you're not skilled enough.
Brand awareness versus direct response.
I'd be undoing everything if I said direct response now. It needs to be a blend of the two. Depends on your goals.
Pick one.
For argument's sake, brand awareness, loyalty.
CPA versus ROAS as your most important metric.
Depends on business model, but if you're e-commerce, absolutely categorically ROAS.
Okay.